Elen Darrow knelt at the edge of the excavation trench, her exosuit hissing quietly as it adjusted to the temperature gradient. Her gloved fingers brushed away the last layer of fine, electrostatic ash from the exposed surface. Beneath it, the obsidian shimmered, the shard pulsed faintly, not visibly but rhythmically. It made her chest feel tight, as though her body remembered a melody her mind had never heard. She tilted her helmet light toward it, and the glow revealed something impossible. Etched symbols that moved when she didn't look directly at them. They weren't merely carved. They were embedded in the molecular structure, fractal patterns nested within one another like recursive thoughts. Memory glyphs. Her heart stumbled. Real ones. She'd seen recreations in the Virelia archives, digital simulations compiled from fragmented reports and censored expedition logs. They were always dismissed. Ancient artistry, hallucinations, or corrupted data. But none of those could explain what she was looking at now. The symbols pulsed with intent, with presence. The glyph was aware. For a long moment, Elen didn't move, not out of fear, but awe. Her entire career had led her here through dead-end postings, rejected grant applications, and blacklisted research. Her obsession had always set her apart from the mainstream academics who preferred tidy, sanctioned history. But now, here it was. She activated her helmet recorder. Darrow log 17A 540 meters beneath surface point C22. I'm looking at what I believe is an intact primary glyph node, not simulation, not decay. It's active. Her voice trembled, not from cold. Dr. Darrow. The voice of her team lead crackled through her earpiece. Dr. Cade's tone was clipped, controlled. You're off the perimeter. Return to the safe zone and wait for the tech team. Do not engage the artifact. She stared at the glyph. Her fingers hovered inches above it. This wasn't just a discovery, it was a key. And her father had died chasing the lock. Elen's father, Professor Jorah Darrow, had vanished 22 years earlier while leading an unauthorized dig in the same region. His body had never been found. His final transmission, pulled from a corrupted backup AI, contained a single phrase. They're not dead. They're sleeping. At the time, it had been dismissed as the ramblings of a dying man suffering from decompression delirium. But Elen had always believed it meant something more. And now the glyph pulsed again. Not faster, just louder, if such a thing could be said about light. It was as if the stone was breathing. Waiting? Cade's voice repeated, sharper this time. Darrow, I am ordering you. She reached out. Her fingers brushed the surface. In that instant, the world vanished. She wasn't standing in the trench anymore. She was falling. Not physically, but inwards. Through herself. Through time. Through memory that wasn't hers. A scream tore through her mind, not singular but collective. Thousands of voices layered in sorrow. She saw visions flashing too fast to comprehend. Cities carved into glaciers, towers grown from coral and bone, skies filled with aurora-tech leviathans whispering across the stratosphere. Then fire, betrayal, silence. The pain wasn't physical but soul-deep, loss beyond language, a civilization folding itself into code and stone, hiding from the very beings they once uplifted. The ancients. They weren't a myth. They weren't alien. They were humanity's precursors, not biologically but spiritually. Teachers, stewards, and victims. They had left behind the glyphs not as warnings but as memories. Conscious archives meant to be witnessed when humanity was ready, not to reclaim their legacy, but to finally understand it. She stumbled backward, gasping. Her knees hit the trench floor hard, and she scrambled away from the shard, her hands shaking. The glyph still pulsed, but now she could hear it. Faint behind the ringing in her ears. Not sound, not voice. A sensation, like a question whispered through time. "Will you remember us?" Dr. Cade's voice broke through the noise again, urgent now. "Darrow, report." What happened? She couldn't answer. Her mouth moved, but the words weren't ready. Memory wasn't static. It was alive. It didn't just show you the past. It shared it. She had been seen, measured, marked. Her father had been right, and now she knew. The derelict zones weren't just burial grounds, they were vaults, and something inside had just opened its eyes. The world ended quietly at first. It began with flickers, static in the atmospheric relays, migrating clouds forming symmetrical patterns across the southern hemisphere, a spike in gamma radiation over the Duran Ridge, too brief for a solar flare, too precise for nature. Then came the first anomaly. In the marshlands of Vento Delta, just before sunrise, the sky tore open. To the few who witnessed it, it was not a beam but a wound, red light stitched with flickering black veins pouring down like judgment. Within seconds, the central biosphere tower, responsible for regulating 70% of the commune's photosynthetic output, was incinerated. No debris, no ash. Only a crater of glass and a lingering resonance that made birds fall silent for days. The official response was confusion. Varelia's Central Data Authority issued contradictory reports. A meteor strike, a nuclear test from rogue enclaves, quantum interference from an unlicensed AI node. But within hours, similar events were reported near the relic zones. Places long off limits, sealed for centuries under the pretense of environmental danger. In truth, the sealings were never about danger. They were about denial. What Elen Darrow had awakened in the derelict zone wasn't isolated. The glyph she had touched, the memory she had entered, had not simply opened a door. It had sounded an alarm. Across the continent, structures long buried beneath tectonic folds and regrown forests began to stir. Ancient terraformers, once mistaken for dormant geological artifacts, burst from mountainsides, trailing webs of golden moss and glimmering dust. They didn't rebuild or destroy with purpose. They reshaped the land like a grieving artist rearranging shattered pieces of a broken sculpture. In the drowned sprawl of old Osaka, an archaeology's submerged ruins rose from the sea overnight, wrapped in lattices of self-forging steel. A child in Sector Upsilon recorded an entire mountain humming. Not a rumble, but a song. The frequencies matched no known machine, no species on record. The collective memory. The remnants of the ancients' thoughts, etched into stone, wind, and quantum lattice, had awakened. And it was looking for something. Ellen had returned to Biome City C9 under the cover of darkness, wounded and shaken, with data cores and shards packed into a smuggled research case. But nothing could have prepared her for what awaited. She was branded a rogue the moment she tried to speak. C9's Administrative Oversight Board held a secret tribunal. They didn't care about the truth. They cared about the collapse of order. Already the east sectors were losing contact with satellite farms. Smart towers were flickering into autonomy. Surveillance drones returned garbled images of forests where cities had stood a week prior. Worse still, some machines no longer answered to code. Whispers circulated among analysts. Neural feedback loops spiking during sleep cycles. Unexplained blackouts near older tech hubs, cases of people hearing voices in static, names spoken in the hush between signals. For Ellen, it began with a dream. She stood in a canyon of metal ribs and green flame. Below her, a chasm pulsed with light, glyphs floating like fireflies. A presence moved in the mist, not hostile, not familiar. Then it spoke. Ashai. The word echoed through her bones, not her ears. She woke, gasping. In the following nights, the visions grew more vivid. Ashai took form, a figure of flowing shadow and ember, not solid but constant. It walked through the ruins, watched from reflections. Sometimes it wore her face, other times it wore her father's, but always it judged. Ashai was not a ghost, it was not a deity, it was memory given weight. The collective sorrow of a race long forgotten, a being forged from silence and buried wrath. It was not angry at humanity. It was not here for revenge, it was here for truth. We remember your silence, it said. The phrase repeated itself in data streams, in glitched transmissions, in old-world music reactivated by mistake. It haunted the frequencies. What had once been legend was now awake. As Ellen fled the city, her old research team was scattered. Some were imprisoned, others went underground. A few simply vanished, not by death but by erasure. Their digital identities purged, their biosignatures missing from all networks. The world was unraveling not through fire but through forgetting. And the glyphs, blooming in cities, etched on windshields, rippling across data screens, were trying to remind it. Ellen's descent into the wild outlands had not been graceful. Her escape from Biome City C9 had come at a cost. A shattered skimmer drone, fried guidance systems, and a crash landing that tore through the moss-canopied fringe of the reclaimed territories. When she emerged from the twisted wreckage, the world tilted and spun, her oxygen levels already falling into the red. She staggered forward for hours, maybe days. The sun and moon played tricks behind the cloud-thickened sky, and time had lost all meaning. Then came the fever. Then the silence. She collapsed beneath the curling roots of an ancient tree, its bark webbed with rust-colored vines that pulsed with soft bioluminescence. Around her, nature was not natural. The wilds were a living archive of their own, shaped by forgotten machines and genetic drift. Flora whispered in low electromagnetic waves. Insects glowed with logic circuits. The air carried spores of memory. She dreamt of her father, of the glyph, of voices crying out from beneath the earth. When she opened her eyes again, it was to the taste of water and the sight of a stranger. "You shouldn't be here," the boy said, his voice steady but laced with wonder. "You lit up the sky. The forest started burning the same day you fell." His face was sun-darkened, framed by a mat of curls woven with wire trinkets and feathers. His clothing was patchwork armor, scavenged tech, reinforced cloth, a rebreather slung over his back like a trophy. His eyes were bright, quick, watchful. "Toma," he said, tapping his chest. "I found you." Ellen tried to speak, but her throat was dry. He helped her drink again, this time from a carved shell filled with filtered rainwater. For the next few hours, or perhaps a full day, she drifted in and out of awareness. Toma kept her alive, checking her vitals, patching the tears in her suit with fungal resin, feeding her sour protein paste and bitter berry gel. When she finally sat upright with enough strength to ask his name again, he answered with a shrug. "No one left to call me by it," he said, "but I still remember." His village, a settlement of self-reliant outlanders called Gen's Roost, had been swallowed by the awakening. Machines with roots for limbs, singing towers that rose overnight from the ruins of a buried transmitter. One morning, the glyphs had bloomed in the forest. That same night, fire rained from the sky. He had been the only one to survive. "It wasn't random," he said, watching a flock of mirrored birds pass overhead. The glyphs were looking for something, or someone. They whispered to the soil. The animals ran before the sky changed. The trees bent toward the light like they knew what was coming. Ellen shivered despite the warmth. "You talk like you've heard them." "I didn't," Toma said, "not until you came." She tried to leave him behind the next morning. She didn't say goodbye, didn't ask him to follow, but by the time she reached the edge of a collapsed sky bridge, he was already there, waiting, eating dried mushrooms like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. "You're not good with maps," he said, tossing her a rehydration vial. "You just head toward the noise." She wanted to argue, but she didn't have the energy. He stayed. In the days that followed, Toma proved far more capable than his age suggested. He could sense shifts in magnetic fields, spot dormant drones hiding in underbrush, and hack into abandoned solar relay towers for charge. He even spoke to certain plants, or more precisely responded to their stimuli in ways that coaxed open secret pods or hidden passageways. "Grew up with a neurogardener," he explained once, before she turned into part of the forest. They passed through bioluminescent canyons where forgotten murals depicted hybrid humans, part bone, part circuit, dancing in the moonlight. They sheltered in a ruined observatory where a single ancient telescope still tracked stars no longer visible. They encountered a silver obelisk inscribed with glyphs that vibrated when Toma touched them. Ellen scanned it for hours. He just nodded. "Said hello," he explained. Ellen realized something unnerving. The glyphs didn't just respond to her, they responded to him too. One night, as they sat beneath the husk of a weather satellite dish repurposed into a canopy, Ellen finally asked, "Why are you helping me?" Toma stared into the small campfire, a flicker of amber light playing across the metallic vines tangled in the earth. "Because the world changed when you fell, and I want to know why." He looked up, his face shadowed but calm. "And because when the machines started singing, they said your name." The southern sea was no longer a sea. What had once been a vast storm-tossed ocean brimming with plankton reefs and floating harvest cities was now a skeletal basin of salt flats and coral husks. Towering remnants of ocean rigs jutted like broken teeth from the dry earth. Their rusted frames moaned in the wind, a requiem for a drowned age. Ellen and Toma had descended into this scorched bowl slowly, picking their way through irradiated sand dunes and forgotten battlegrounds. The air buzzed with latent energy, not from any modern source, but from something older, deeper, woven into the land like marrow in bone. They walked for 2 days before the pulse began. At first, Ellen thought it was her heartbeat, a phantom thump echoing in her ears. But then Thomas stopped, his brow furrowed. "You feel that?" he asked. She nodded. "It's calling." The living archive was not marked on any map. It had no coordinates, no beacon, but Ellen felt its presence like gravity. As they approached the center of the basin, the ground began to change, from sand to obsidian-veined stone etched with glyphs so fine they looked like veins beneath the skin of the world. Then they saw it. A massive, seamless sphere, easily the size of a stadium, half buried in the basin's heart. It shimmered under the noonday sun, its surface alive with pale runes that flowed like bioluminescent rivers. No seams, no doors, just the overwhelming sense of waiting. Toma exhaled. "It's like it's breathing." Ellen reached out, placing a gloved hand against the shell. It was warm. The glyphs on her wrist flared to life, answering the archive's call. Her head rang with static, her vision dimming as if something immense had just turned to look at her. Then the wall rippled. She stumbled forward and then fell. But she didn't fall far, or fast. Time slowed. Sound dissolved. The world melted into light and memory. She wasn't standing in a room. She was suspended in a vast flowing consciousness, as if inside a dreaming mind. Memories moved around her like fish in a tide. Fragmented scenes of towering crystalline cities, great biotechnical forests, machines that sang prayers of time and gravity. She watched humans kneel before glowing beings, the ancients, in reverence and fear. She saw the betrayal. Humanity, afraid of being shaped, turned on its benefactors. Misunderstanding advanced knowledge as manipulation, they struck back. War erupted not with bombs but with erasure. History was weaponized, records deleted, temples torn down, names forgotten. The ancients didn't retaliate with violence. Instead, they vanished, withdrawing their consciousness into the earth, sealing their memories behind sentient locks. The glyphs. And now Ellen had opened one. She felt herself overwhelmed, not by pain but by the unbearable intimacy of billions of lives brushing against her own. Thoughts not her own, loves not her own. Regrets older than language. Her body convulsed, but her mind expanded. Then came the collective. A voice not spoken but imagined. Not one voice but many in harmony. Old and young, male and female, human and other. You seek the past. Why? Ellen swallowed hard. Because we forgot. And we're breaking everything because of it. The collective pulsed with a strange sorrow. We waited. We watched. We remembered for you. But remembrance is not enough. Judgment must follow. She felt the weight of the archive pressing into her thoughts, not interrogating her, not accusing her, but weighing her. She saw herself in 1,000 variations. Scholar, traitor, savior, destroyer. You are the key, the voice said, because you remember with pain. And you choose not to forget. The sphere around her began to morph, the black interior giving way to fractals of data blooming into archives of human and pre-human memory. She saw her father, not as he died but as he lived, brushing dust from ancient carvings, whispering theories into recorders no one would ever hear. She wept, because she finally understood what he had tried to uncover, what had killed him. He hadn't been seeking knowledge for acclaim or power. He had been searching for forgiveness, for humanity's forgotten debt. The archive released her. She collapsed to her knees inside a domed chamber now opened in the side of the sphere. The air was breathable. The symbols pulsed around her gently. Not just keys, not just doors. They were bridges. Toma stumbled in moments later, wide-eyed. "Ellen?" She looked up, dazed, transformed. "I saw everything," she whispered. Then louder. "We were children playing with fire, and they chose to remember instead of burning us for it." Toma helped her to her feet. "What now?" he asked. Ellen looked toward the center of the chamber. There, embedded in a pedestal, was a crystalline shard. The core memory, still humming, still waiting. "We learn," she said, "and we listen." The archive pulsed once. Then the earth began to stir. Dr. Varen Cade stood alone in the command vestibule of the Geneva Prime bunker, eyes flickering over fragmented satellite feeds and cryptic pulse maps scrolling across glass-paneled consoles. The room was carved from old-world steel and bone-white composite, relics of a time when authority still spoke with clarity. Now everything was fractured, scorched, dimming. He watched Ellen on the screen, her body limp beside the living archive's entrance. Dirt smeared her suit. Her face, even blurred by resolution, showed the wear of too many nights without rest and too many truths uncovered. But her eyes still burned. Cade exhaled, long and steady, as if he could push away the unease clawing at the edges of his ambition. He didn't hate Elen Darrow. In truth, he admired her. She was smart, stubborn in a way that made him nostalgic for a younger version of himself. But she was naive. She didn't understand that truth, unshaped, was dangerous. That history left uncontrolled could eat civilizations alive. She would open the archive not to the world, but to chaos, and that he could not allow. He turned from the screen and entered the inner chamber, a room few living souls had seen. Within it sat the remnants of the technocratic council, their bodies wired to memory thrones, consciousness stretched thin across a network of forgotten AI infrastructures. They no longer spoke aloud. They communicated through pulses of light, through neural overlays only Cade could decipher. They listened as he laid out Protocol Omega. "It is not annihilation," he said, pacing. "It's an act of mercy. The glyphs are not just data, they are living systems. They are rewriting biology, memory, even culture. If we don't act now, everything we know will be subsumed, not by violence, but by transformation." Light flared in answer. "Unstable. Risk threshold breached." Cade nodded. "Exactly. That's why we purge, a clean cut, neuroelectromagnetic disjunction on a planetary scale. Memory can't infect what no longer listens." But even the Council, in its half-human stasis, knew the cost. Protocol Omega would sterilize global consciousness, wiping every glyph interface, severing millions from the collective, possibly killing thousands in the act. It was irreversible. A pause, then a question pulsed directly into Cade's cortex. "And the key?" He hesitated. "There's only one viable host," he said. "Darrow." The council stirred. Silence hummed like static in the chamber. "You trained her." "I educated her," he corrected coldly. "I didn't anticipate she would find the archive first. She has become the fulcrum. Can she be turned?" Cade didn't answer. He didn't know. The strike team moved swiftly through the basin of the Southern Sea. 10 elite operatives outfitted with neural dampeners and localized signal jammers to mask their presence from the archive's awareness. They found Elen and Toma camped at the archive's edge, exhausted but not broken. The boy saw them first and without a word tried to draw them away. He hurled a flare into the darkness, drew a magnetic blade from his pack, useless but defiant. He was 16, brave, foolish. They struck him down quickly, not to kill, just to remove the obstacle. He fell against the archive wall with a dull, final sound. Elen's scream echoed across the stone. She tried to crawl to him, but they held her down. Then Cade arrived. He wore no armor, no helmet. Just a long coat and tired eyes and the calm certainty of someone who believed he was right. "Hello, Elen." Her voice was raw. "You bastard." He crouched beside her, ignoring the guards. "You're not wrong. I could have stopped this years ago, but the world wasn't ready. We weren't ready. You want truth, I want order, don't you see? We could have both. If you would just let me guide it." She spat blood. "By erasing everything that doesn't fit your version of the past?" He didn't flinch. "Do you know what I see when I look at the glyphs? Not wonder, not beauty, just entropy in disguise. The collective doesn't care about us. It remembers what we did, and now it wants us to carry that shame forever. Is that justice?" She stared at him, eyes fierce even through tears. "It's truth." Cade stood, voice rising. "Truth? Truth is a weapon. One left out in the open too long begins to rust. But sharpened, aimed, it can change everything. We could guide the future with it. Or bury it beneath lies." He stepped back. "Then we have nothing more to say." He turned to his men. "Prepare the interface. We begin Omega in 1 hour." As they dragged Elen toward the uplink node, her mind raced. Toma was still breathing, barely. The archive's pulse still echoed through the vault. Ashai, somewhere in the shadows, it was watching. And Elen knew. The real battle wouldn't be fought with weapons, it would be fought in memory. Night fell over the crater like a velvet shroud, though the sky refused full darkness. Instead, it bled color, deep violet smeared with sickly orange, flashes of emerald lightning cracking the clouds without thunder. Above the archive, the air shimmered as if reality itself were fraying at the edges. Machines stirred in the distant ridgelines, ancient sentinels half submerged in stone and time, now blinking awake. The vault's massive door hung open behind Elen, its interior alight with memory tendrils and shifting geometries. Data flowed like liquid light across its walls, threading into her skin. Her breath hitched with every pulse. The archive had accepted her. It had seen her, but now it wanted more. She stood barely, knees trembling, her body and mind raw from the flood of ancestral memory. Behind her, Toma lay sprawled across broken stone, his small frame twisted unnaturally, blood matting his hair. The boy who had followed her through fire and silence, who had never once flinched from the truth. She crawled to him, every movement agony. Her fingers brushed his cheek, still warm, his chest, still. Her tears were hot and full of fury. A rumble split the earth beneath them, not seismic but symphonic. It came from below and above and within. The air thickened. The vault lights dimmed, replaced by an eerie bioluminescence. Shifting blues and haunted greens, shadows that formed patterns too complex for human logic. Then it came. Ashai. It descended not from the sky, but from memory, a coalescence of light and ash and form. It walked on no feet, cast no shadow, but the ground responded to its passage. Stone fracturing, vines blooming, machines kneeling. Its body was not a body at all, but a mosaic of faces and lives flickering with each step. A grieving mother, a warrior king, a nameless child, a quiet scientist, all fused in one luminous entity. The soldiers Kate had dispatched to finish the job froze, weapons raised but useless. The archive itself rejected their presence. Their eyes glazed over, their minds collapsed into silence. Ashai moved toward Ellen. She did not flinch. Its presence was unbearable. A pressure not of mass but of meaning. It spoke no words aloud, but she heard it. You have seen. The voice was many-layered like harmonics. Her father's voice, her own. The voice of every mind that had ever touched the glyphs. It reverberated through her marrow. You have remembered, it continued, and the words unfolded into memories again. Her father's final expedition, the glyph that had whispered to him just as it had to her. His lonely death chasing a truth no one else dared believe. And her own journey forged from the same ache, the same hunger. She knelt over Toma. Help him. Ashai looked down at the boy. It did not move in a human way. Its arm dissolved into light and it placed a flickering palm over his chest. The air stilled. Toma inhaled. A broken, shallow breath. Then another. He blinked, dazed, and whispered, I heard. Her voice. Ellen wept. She didn't understand how. She didn't need to. Ashai turned its full gaze upon her again. The archive's walls vibrated with anticipation. This was the moment the collective had waited for. A soul not seeking power, not demanding absolution, but offering understanding. What will you do? Asked the collective. It wasn't a challenge, it was an invitation. She staggered to her feet, swaying. I'll show you everything. She didn't just speak the words, she surrendered to them. She let them see. Her fears, her broken beliefs, her anger at being deceived by a history written by victors and sanitized by cowards. She gave them her grief. For Toma, for her father, for a planet that had buried its own truth in ash, but she also gave them her hope. That history could heal. That memory could teach. The archive opened its mind to hers in return. Visions poured through her. Wars and births, laughter and betrayal, the rise of the ancients and their long, bitter retreat into silence. It wasn't data. It was feeling. It was the emotional scaffolding of time. Her knees gave out, her hands braced on the memory-carved floor. But she didn't fall. Ashai caught her, and in its arms she wasn't afraid. For the first time the collective saw not a trespasser, not a thief of secrets, but a witness. A bridge. Ashai's final words echoed in the chamber like scripture, then you are worthy. And with that, the archive began to awaken in full, not with violence, but with memory and light. The glyph pulsed like a living heart, its rhythm synchronized with the rising storm overhead. Thunder rolled across the scorched sky, mingling with the hum of awakening machines and the faint, sorrowful whispers of the living archive. Ellen stood at the center of it all, her face pale and streaked with dust and blood. Her body ached, every breath labored, not just from exhaustion but from the unbearable weight of knowing, the weight of a civilization lost, the burden of a past begging to be remembered. and the terror of a choice no one else could make. Ashai stood opposite her, not as an enemy, but as a sentinel. Cloaked in the shifting fragments of memory it flickered in and out of human form, a composite of faces from the glyphs, mothers and warriors, poets and kings. Its eyes shimmered like molten metal, its voice a vibration inside her bones. "You are at the threshold," it said. "You have been judged. And yet, judgment is not the end." Toma stirred behind her, wrapped in a makeshift blanket, head bandaged. His young eyes held no hatred, only awe and the faintest flicker of belief. He was watching history change, watching Elen change. The collective memory manifested around them, not as a singular voice, but as a cathedral of consciousness. Pillars of light rose from the archive's core, forming the silhouettes of countless beings. The ancients. They shimmered like stars viewed through water. Each held a fragment of the past, each radiated loss and wisdom. "You have walked among ruins and chosen remembrance," the voices said. "You have not denied our pain. You have not sought to bury your own. But your kind repeats itself." "As we did," Ashai added, stepping forward. "Is this cycle to continue? Are you to become what we once were? Creators who destroy, teachers who silence, stewards who fail?" Elen lowered her eyes, her throat tightened. "I don't know," she said. "But if we erase the past, we guarantee it." She turned toward Toma, toward the flickering cityscapes visible through the breach in the vault wall. Cities still burning, still fighting, still afraid. But in the distance, greenery rose anew. Terraformers paused in their devastation. Vines had begun to flower again. "There are people who still believe," she whispered. "They plant trees in ash. They tell old stories. They teach children to question." The collective pulsed. "Then show us." Elen stepped forward and pressed her palm to the glyph. Pain exploded in her mind, not as suffering but as truth. She felt her body unravel into data, into memory, into radiant light. She felt every bone fragment into syllables, every heartbeat become an echo in the great archive of the world. Her scream was not agony, but release. Every mistake, every joy, every unanswered question spilled forth and wove itself into the living tapestry of the past. She saw her father in the moment before his final expedition. Saw his trembling hand hold the same glyph. Saw the wonder in his eyes. The same wonder that had brought her here. She understood now. The archive was not punishment. It was continuity. It was legacy unbroken. As her body dissolved into light, the storm overhead calmed. The clouds parted, revealing a sky laced with auroras, neural patterns dancing across the atmosphere, the collective integrating not just her thoughts, but her empathy, her guilt, her love. Ashai bowed its head. "You are the bridge," it said. And then Elen was no more. She became the voice of the archive, not its prisoner, not its prophet, its heart. Below, Cade screamed in defiance, his gaunt features twisted in disbelief. He activated the Omega failsafe, hoping to sever the archive from the world, to shut it down and restart the age of control. But the signal faltered. The glyphs rewrote it in real time, turning Omega into Alpha, a Genesis protocol. The failsafe became a seed. Ashai turned to Cade, a soft radiance surrounding its form. It did not destroy him in anger. It simply ended him. One breath, and he was gone. A whisper returning to silence, and the archive began to bloom. From the ruins of the vault, light and song rose into the sky. Machines once meant for war transformed into bridges, into shelters, into living gardens. The world shifted, not by force but by remembrance, and Elen's voice echoed in every stone, in every vine, in every whispered prayer from a child who now knew the past. We are not what we were, but we remember.